Hello and welcome back to War Thunder. So today, I'd like to take a look at the P47 Thunderbolt. It's an aircraft that I've really liked for a long time. This has been kind of a standby of myself, and I know my friend Stonewall and myself really like this aircraft. It seems to be an aircraft that excels in two very different roles if you know how to play it. This is an aircraft that some people would think that if you don't know how to fly very well, you think, this thing sucks, I can't use it, all I can use is now. There's a certain way to use it, but you gotta use it right. The P47 in this game, it's very simple. Historically and in this game, it's a ground and pound aircraft. It can carry 2,500 pounds of bombs and roughly 500 pounds worth of rockets. Now, I say that term loosely, but essentially in War Thunder, it is the same amount of firepower with those 5 rockets. It's about 100 pounds per, which is roughly accurate. Or it is a high-altitude fighter. Now, getting it up to the high altitude, you will sometimes get outclimb, you sometimes won't. Basically, if you climb with this thing, you head off in a different direction from the enemy, and you climb somewhere else, you end up on top of them mid-battle. Or, not the first engagement, put it that way. You're kind of the vulture of the sky. You kind of wait for an enemy that's unsuspecting or not looking at you, and you can come by with your 850 cals and obliterate them. And I use the word obliterate because you do have 3,200 rounds of ammo and you have 850 cals. It's not, especially when you get the armor-piercing tracer incendiary rounds, the A-pits. They can handle ground targets and they can handle air targets. And I will say, I think this aircraft, because of the ordnance, I wouldn't focus on ground target ammo, simply because you can already take out ground targets. I would really focus on defending yourself from air targets and use the A-pit rounds. But that is your choice. So my usual recommendation with this aircraft is if you're flying alone, do not take ordnance. If you're flying with a friend or in a squad, then you can take ordnance. The reason being, you need someone backing you up. You need someone with there to help you when essentially the battle really starts, when you get into some trouble. But anyways, let's move on to a little bit of the history. So the production of the P47 Thunderbolt, aka the XP47B, was built from 1941 to 1945. Now, the XP47B was technically done in 1940 into 1941, and then the start of the P47 was started. Now, it really started, the actual models that were sent to war weren't really started until the P47, the C variant. Now, really, there were only minor changes from the original P43 Lancer, aka XP47B. They essentially kept upgrading the engine and the horsepower ratings and whatnot to a point where essentially it was usable. They added things like sideways opening canopies and better maneuverability, better ignition system, things like that, high altitude ailerons, so they didn't freeze and whatnot with the cold. Pressurized cockpits were even added later on. But for altitude. But the point being is that it wasn't like an aircraft that needed major remodels. It was actually an aircraft that, when it was designed, seemed to fit the role fairly well. But anyways, the P47C was built on Long Island. And that's kind of the real reason why it's called the C variant. And it even became the P47B variant, which essentially that one didn't do too well in 1942. But that's where they started with the C variant. And those are mainly produced out of Long Island. They ordered 602 of these P47Cs. And that's kind of about it. There was a C1, there was a C2S. And then they went to the D. And the reason why there's a D, which is in the War Thunder, that's the D25 currently, is those were produced at the Farmingdale plant on Long Island, but then also a new plant came out in Evansville, Indiana. And the Evansville plant was mainly responsible for the D series. And the D originally, the D1, was actually the same as the original Cs. There weren't any changes. However, from the D15 onwards, they wanted increased, basically the Army started asking for increased range to help with bomber escorts and longer targets, because as the war went on, we started getting closer and closer to Germany, and you had to go farther and farther and farther. So they kept asking to have more mounts for ordnance and larger tanks to be able to add on essentially extra fuel tanks. And that's kind of it. The only exception being they just kept adding smaller improvements. And that's kind of it. This wasn't an aircraft that, up until the D series, nothing major changed. There was nothing groundbreaking or nothing. They stuck with the cannons. Machine guns. They stuck with the machine guns. They stuck with most of the other things. So it's kind of an aircraft that I really like it because they got it right the first time. And, well, that's what I like about this aircraft. It seems to be a very simple aircraft that's straight to the point. And that's how it really is in War Thunder. And I like how it seems like this is one of the few aircraft in War Thunder that I really feel like the characteristics of the aircraft were really well modeled in War Thunder with their physics engine. Now, there's a couple things I do want to point out. This is an aircraft that's at a 3.7 BR, which is in line with the Lightning, with the Hellcat now, and with the A5 King Cobra, and also with the premium BF109 F4. That's the premium one you can buy for the Americans. It seems to be that at that BR, your speed is at the higher end of the speed. You're turning, yeah, this thing doesn't turn. This thing's a flying tank. This thing's called the Jug. This thing, it doesn't turn that well. Although, little footnote, at high enough speeds it turns well, but I'm going to get to that later. And I really think at this BR, it has some of the most effective weapons in the game. I'm really a big fan of the 50 cals because of their accuracy. This is something that, if you guys have seen my earlier videos, that was one of my complaints about the Corsair 1C, was the fact that, yeah, the AM-N2 cannons are great, but they just fly all over the place. You're basically rolling the dice to see if you're going to hit the enemy. Well, with this, I feel like I can be laser accurate. And as long as I approach the enemy right, they generally don't leave my crosshairs. They're generally done because I know I will hit. I'm not taking a gamble, and I like that. And with the 850 cals having double the firepower of the Hellcat, if you thought the Hellcat was good at a pass, this thing should take most anything at one pass. This is an aircraft that, don't forget, if it takes out enemy bombers very well. Now, granted, any bomber that's not an American bomber ain't a bomber worth flying in this game. Should it be that way? No, but that's just how it is. So you don't have to really worry about that. Now, with the ground and pound roll, having 3,200 rounds of ammo on this D series means that you can take out 20 ground targets easily without having to really worry about it, and still take out a couple fighters. So you have more than enough ammo. You don't have to skimp on it. It's not like you're flying a Yak 1 with, 60 rounds of cannon and a couple hundred rounds of machine gun. It's an aircraft that, if you know how to play it correctly, excels at what it does. Now, if you look at the flight characteristics of this thing, this is an aircraft that at altitude does well, at higher altitudes. Granted, it's not the fastest up there. The 109s will still outrun you. However, it handles well enough because of the massive surface area of the wings. So it doesn't have as much turning performance loss up there as you would think, which means some of even the Russian aircraft start to suffer up there, and even some of the Japanese aircraft. If you can get some of the Zeros to be stupid enough to start climbing up to, 5K meters, you can actually start being very competitive with them. Not only will you outrun them at that altitude, but you can be competitive turning them. You never out-turn them, but you can start bridging that gap a little bit, especially with using combat flaps and even your landing flaps here and there. That's something I would advise to some Thunderbolt pilots. If you get below 180 miles an hour and you're in a turning fight, especially if you're something that doesn't turn very well, you can use landing flaps and whatnot. But the point is, for this thing to be effective in this game, you have to practice with it. This is not an aircraft you just get in and do well in, because it does two things well. It does them very well. But anyways, I would suggest for anybody flying this aircraft, there's two rules to follow. One, if you're flying alone, don't take ordnance. If you take ordnance and you're alone, nobody on the team is going to help you. You are going to be a sitting duck at 500 meters, ground pounding, and an LA-5 or an LA-9 or a BF109 or Focke-Wulf, they're just going to come by and kill you, and you're not going to be able to defend yourself. You're done. If you're flying with a squad, then you can bring ordnance. If you're flying alone, don't. With a squad, do. Remember that. Then you're with the squad, you don't have to, but I usually recommend it because you're a greater percentage of the team, and generally, which means there are less bombers and ground attack aircraft, you should probably pick up that slack. Now, given to that, also, remember, this thing carries 2,500 pounds of bombs and plus 500 pounds effective of rockets, which means you can take out a base. Keep that in mind, because if you fly in a squad of 3 or 4 Thunderbolts, you can take out all of the enemy's bases, or better yet, a lot of ground targets. So, the Thunderbolt is an aircraft that can really change the pace of a battle. It's an aircraft that, if you're losing, it can turn it into a winning battle, if you fly it correctly. But please, please, don't be that Thunderbolt pilot that gets into a turning fight with a Zero. Don't do it. Don't do it. Just don't. Don't do it. I see it too often, and it kills me. Or better yet, don't do it with the Spitfires. Because that landing on Hokkaido, I guess that practice is never going to end, because we've been doing it for 2 years now. Maybe 3 years. I forget how long War Thunder's been out. But anyways, I'm getting off track. So, let's go into the video. And this video, I have to caution, this is the P47 fighting against the Japanese. I have not been able to fight this thing against the Germans lately, or the Russians. For some reason, every time I fly it, it goes to Japan. So, I'm taking a good example from my friend Stonewall and I flew. And this is pretty much exactly, if you're going to be fighting with the P47, notice how I keep the energy up. And the only time I get into a turn fight is when I have allies with me. That's one of the keys. You never want to be alone in a turn fight. Stick with your group. The only time you should be alone is if you have a major energy advantage on your enemies. So, watch this video. Let me know what you think. And let's watch it. Hello and welcome back. So, we are watching this replay with myself and Stonewall. So, basically we're here battling the Japanese, which, granted, doesn't really make sense, but it's War Thunder. What do you want? So, in regards to this aircraft, about its capabilities more within War Thunder, I would say this, on maps like this where there are not clearly marked enemy bases, basically on this map they have a carrier fleet and some assorted ground forces. I usually say the hell with taking any ordnance, and first flight out, oh my god, this game's beautiful. But anyways, first flight out, I would usually say, just go in there and try and kill some fighters. Don't worry about the ground-based gameplay necessarily. Now, I would like to add that I really feel like this aircraft against the Japanese is actually very, very effective. Here's the weird thing, is lately when I fly this thing, it's been only against the Japanese. I have not gotten much against the Germans, and every time I face the Russians, I get an I-185 on my ass that just kills me. So lately, I-185 has been the bane of my existence in the P47. What do you want? Because they're just as fast. I can outrun them in a dive, but yet when I get down low, they just outclimb me, and it's just a mess. But anyways, against the Germans, this is very effective. But even against the Japanese, this is an aircraft that, just like the Corsair, and I know people are going to freak out and say just like the Corsair when it's not, but just like the Corsair, it does very well, actually, doing the exact opposite of what most of the Japanese aircraft do. Now, remember, this aircraft, since it does like handling at high speed, this is an aircraft that does really well in a dive. It becomes very stable. This is an aircraft that the more speed you put on it, the more stability it has. And because I have yet to be able to really break the wings throwing this thing around at 420, 440 miles an hour, you can easily make any inexperienced Japanese pilot rip their wings if they're not paying attention. But anyways, myself and Stonewall and I are flying out, and we are slightly turning away just to make sure that we're not the first ones in the battle. And that's one of the big things with your P47. You got to make sure you are not the first enemy spotted. But in this 3.7 BR, weirdly enough, with the Japanese, you usually see the A6M2, A6M3, things like that, the Ki-61s with the 50's. But they don't really have much that really puts you to the test. It's kind of kicking puppies at this BR. Because even in a P47, you can still outclimb the Zeros and the Ki-61. The only thing is the Ki-43-2, which is the one with the dual cannons instead of the 50's. That one has become something that can get really quite annoying, actually. That's an aircraft that, for a P47 pilot, if that Ki-43-2 knows what they're doing, it's kind of effective, and they're really good. But anyways, continuing. So essentially, yep, there's Stonewall in the background. So just kind of flying along, you know, deep. I've yet to really see much. And that's going to be a bit of what happens with this aircraft, is generally on maps like this, most of the Japanese pilots are going to stay down low, but you want to stay up high to maintain, you want that energy when you need it. You want to be able to pull that out and dive and do whatever you have to do when you need it. And that's kind of really one of the big keys with this aircraft. Now, I'm kind of torn with this aircraft, because I think at the 3.7 BR, it's really all about this thing and the Corsair 1D. The Lightning lately doesn't perform as well as I think it should, and the premium 109F4 is just okay, and the King Cobra is quite good, but I kind of prefer the other one. So for me, this is kind of the sweet spot with this and the Corsair, although I usually prefer this every time over the Corsair. But anyways, so I see a couple A6M2 and an A6M3 down there. Just kind of hanging around Stonewall and myself. We're looking, we're looking at that. We're just, salivating. Ooh, juicy kills. Now, if you're a Japanese fighter pilot, what you want to do, ironically, it sounds weird, but you actually want to see if you can energy trap a P47 and try and outclimb him and get above him and force him to take evasive actions. But they're staying down low. I see a target, and I'm going in to take him out. And James panned the camera around. Thank you, James. And I see a Ki-61, and 850 cals opening up on you. There's nothing you can do. Now, there's one thing you never want to do with the P-47. You never want to have your airplane profile, which means that if I can see from wingtip to wingtip, if I'm looking at you, and I can see the whole of the aircraft like if I was looking top down. And you'll see that happen later in the game. If anything against a P-47, if they're coming at you, if you can do a quick vertical maneuver using landing flaps or combat flaps or takeoff flaps, whichever ones you want to use, and try and throw them off, as long as it stays horizontal, not vertical, because what happens with the gun convergence on these, if I get someone sideways, they won't always hit. Sometimes they'll both go around or they'll both meet too far forward. It doesn't always hit properly. But as you'll see, if enemies go side profile on, they're screwed every time. So there goes Stonewall. He's going to try to keep down Gundog in the A6M3. It makes a good pass, sets him on fire. And Cyclotrol. Now this is why with the P47 I screwed up. And that's what I wanted to show is the fact that you need to take the right approach. You don't try and force the P47. Now notice the actually energy retention too. Even though it was only from like 1,800 meters, 1,600 meters, we still got up to 400 miles an hour. This is an aircraft that, oop, there's someone on my tail, they break off. But notice the speed and the energy retention, especially in this climb. And that's something, zoom climbing is with this P47. I absolutely love it. Short burst zoom climbing, it does fantastic with it. Anyways, pull back up. Notice the speed drop though. Notice how much speed that bleeds off. This is on an aircraft. This is an aircraft that you do 60 or 70 degree turns. Anything past that, you start bleeding major speed. So try and keep your turns to a minimum. Anyways, yet again, increasing speed in a slight dive. Now at this BR, mind you, nothing else really can keep up with you, maybe besides a Corsair, but even then you'll probably outrun him. So, Ki-61, yet again, I have a really bad approach. Terrible, 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 James, what are you doing? Pull off him. Now, there's another tactic with this thing that I do. Sometimes I will purposely take a bad attack angle just because I know I have enough ammo, and I can really help out Stonewall over there, because I knew he was having a little bit of problem. The guy was giving him a little bit of hassle. I give him another target. Now, see, this is what's hard. Ki-43 on, see how I missed? And then he gives me the side profile, and then, yeah, you're done, dude. You're getting 850 cals on you. You're done. You never want to do that. If anything, you gotta try and do something to keep it so your aircraft is sideways on. It gives you a better chance. I'm not saying it's a guaranteed, but it does help out. So there goes another A6M, A6M5, A5M. That's that lower ranked Japanese aircraft, which why is he in there anyway? But anyways, HGRG and the A6M3 is over there, and there's a Ki-61 coming in. It looks like I ignore the Ki-61, go after the A6M3. Don't go head on with an A6M3. A6M3, you don't want to go head on with a P47 to me. You're gonna lose. I have 850 cals, you have 2 30 cals and 2 20 mils. I am going to win every time. And granted, going head on with an A6M3 actually isn't always a good choice either. Simply because those 20 mils are actually relatively effective, and actually, I found with it, you could pilot that very well. But anyways, alright, so their Ki-61 goes down. There's Cyclotrol again, way back there in the A6M2. And it looks like I see a target. James, change the camera. Thank you, James. Where to go? It's over there. Now, see, here's the P47's bad. Notice the speed I'm at. And notice how this thing just wallows around and you lose control. And really, guys, the rule is keep this thing above 200 miles an hour. Go down to 180 if you have to, but you want to keep the energy up. Yeah, he's dead. He's dead, James. You don't need to keep looking at the camera, James. Just... God. I need to get a new camera, James. He's not very good. There's another A6. Way up high. So the point is we're at 3 kills at this point, and it's... I know it seems like not much action has happened. It's just because, well, this BR... Japan loses, like, every time. Especially when you count that you have Spitfire Mark 9s and 5Cs. And 5B Trops. I mean, it's... I dare say, I think, at the 3.7-ish BR, Japan doesn't have much until the 5.0 area where they get the A6M5. And that's an aircraft that I think is quite capable. Yet again, I'm below 180 miles an hour, and then this thing is just not very happy. Now this A6M2 yet again. He's going after the P47, and nope. I try to get it around, nope. I'm below 180, below 200, so I can't do much. However, put it in a dive, and I do not use the combat flaps this time if I want speed. If you're low on speed, don't bother helping you in the turn. If the guy's going away from it, I need speed. So I'm up to 243 miles an hour. And now here's where I have enough control, up to 260. Now this thing's feeling comfortable. I'm feeling stable. I feel like I can hit whatever I'm trying to shoot at. And so this guy yet again goes side profile on, and I can get a nice amount of hits on him. Bang. Ooh, just missing that Spitfire. I didn't realize that the first time. And the guy is on fire. And as per usual, once you're on fire, you have about a 70% chance that you are done. So there we go. That's 4 kills. I would tell you this, if there's any aircraft you can get right now, please get this aircraft. I love this aircraft. I would recommend it to everybody. And it's honestly a beautiful aircraft to fly. And please do it in squads. You can get 3 or 4 of these, and you'll see time and time again, you will own the airspace all day and every day. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you liked the video. Let me know down below if you like it. Hit the comment button, subscribe to the channel. Let me know what you think. Thank you very much for watching, and I shall catch you next time.